Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer. With me once again, my good friend, Deb Romero, certified Alexander Technique instructor. And today's topic, dun dun dun, dun drum roll, please, biomechanics and physics. Ooh, that's a scary
Mm,
topic.
mm,
Like, we'll probably
mm.
get 0 clicks on this one, right?
Oh, you never know.
You never know.
Maybe
But
some people will come to a better understanding.
well, and the whole reason I wanted to talk with you about this is because it's a daily part of your life. It's a daily part of my life.
Hmm
Neither one of us could pass the math test. Like, I could not do the math. You could not do the math. We couldn't write papers on it. But the whole point of discussing this is trying to remove a little bit of intimidation when
Yeah,
people use the words biomechanics. And to me, it really comes down to physics. So I sort of
yeah,
want
I
to
agree.
I want to break that down because it's not elite. Do you know what I mean? It's not
I
an
agree.
elite topic. It is
I think we
so
just push it away because of those words.
the big
When
words.
when there are those words, if we just remove the words and have a conversation about that, it's it's not that complicated.
Not only that, but to me, science is very important. And science, by definition, is inherently slow because of the testing and proving and
Hmm
reproducibility about it. But when we know through science. But nature doesn't wait for science.
Right.
Nature keeps rolling. So, in other words, long before Newton gave this force of gravity a name, it still existed, right?
True.
And so it's always been there. It's just that science gives it a name and helps us gain more understanding or perspective of nature. Whether we're talking biomechanics or we're talking physics, to me, it's like science is catching up with what already is, trying to
Documenting
understand.
it. Yeah, that makes sense because as you know, of having some Alexander lessons, it's very hard to describe or but it's a natural thing. To give it meaning or to scientifically prove it, that's the difficult part.
Yeah, because bodies are freaking complicated.
Yeah.
And we're talking, and actually, let's kick off this conversation with exactly defining what we're talking about between biomechanics and physics. Because biomechanics is, I kid you not, the new buzzword
Yeah.
in the horse industry.
Yeah.
Even in sports medicine,
Oh,
biomechanics is,
really?
oh yeah, it is the cutting edge of training, whether we're talking horse athletes or human athletes. And so biomechanics is the study of the shape of the body. So it means that every bone in the skeleton has a distinct shape, which also means it has a distinct purpose,
Right. That
right?
makes sense. Yeah.
And same with soft tissues, tendons, ligaments, muscles, muscle attachments. So the study of biomechanics is to look at the body, whether it's a horse body or a human body, as a machine that has an inherent design,
Hmm
right? You could say, we don't care how the design got there, but every human body has the same essential
Right.
structure or design, right? So that structure, just like our car, has an ideal function,
Mhm.
right? And so biomechanics is the study of the physical bits and pieces of the body and how they best coordinate or function together for the least amount of wear and tear and maximum performance.
Okay.
That's what biomechanics is. Is that confusing or does that sound like a pretty clear explanation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting this vision in my head of David Gorman, who's an Alexander Technique teacher, hand drew, illustrated. When you were talking about everything has its unique thing that it's supposed to do, hand drew the bones of the human body and put the actual striations on the bones, which is like the stress marks of
Right.
torque of, and you can see stretch marks of torque of proper use and not proper use down
Right.
to the bone level, which I thought was fascinating, to
And
see it at that level of function.
it's amazingly
Yeah,
complex. Like
yeah.
the more you dig into the mechanics of the body, whether it's the horse body or the human body, you just stand back and wonder at the
How
awe.
does that
Like
work? How do we
it's
walk and chew gum?
amazing.
I don't know.
I know. And yet we all do every
We
day.
all do it.
And so biomechanics, like one of the most important understandings through biomechanics to me is that there are certain elements of the body that are best designed. If we designed it on a computer and put a body together, there's certain elements of the body that help with primarily stability and other parts of the body that are primarily for locomotion or
Right.
adaptability, right? So you have your stability and your locomotion. That's how we function without falling over. And so we can do that in an inefficient way, or we can do it in the most possibly efficient use of the inherent mechanical design. So that's why biomechanics is such a big buzzword in either horse training and or any athletic training,
Hmm.
right? So elite athletes of all sports can learn new coordination that optimizes the use of their mechanical body.
Yes.
And that's what you do with Alexander technique.
Hmm.
You're teaching people to learn a coordination or patterns of movement that are optimizing the design that can't be changed. The design is the design is the design.
Right. You're just working with what you got.
Right. And so basically, a lot of people think of balance as my horse isn't falling over and I'm not falling over, so we're good. Right. But when we get into biomechanics, we're looking at if you go past the skill of not falling off or not falling over,
Hmm.
right, you can actually tweak habits of coordination, habits of movement that start to use the body according to its inherent design in a more
Yes.
and more efficient way. So that's the whole study of biomechanics, but the body is the body.
Right.
The body is a body. The study of the mechanics is new and the words are new and sometimes intimidating. But I go, we're all
Yeah.
kind of, the body is the body. It's been the body for, hundreds of thousands of years. So this is what we have. Learning to work with it in better and better and better ways is what science brings to the table,
Right.
right? And that's the whole premise behind Alexander technique
Yes.
is just that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Use
and
it better.
use it better.
Take what
Learn,
you got and learn to use it better. That's pretty
yeah,
much what we're talking about.
yeah. But what the drawback of biomechanics as a popular buzzword in the horse industry, it's an important study. And I think if you're a horse trainer or a working professional riding instructor, or you as an Alexander technique instructor, you need to learn about the biomechanics. You need to understand, kind of like a mechanic for a car needs to learn about the engine.
Right. Just the basics.
And I was surprised, people who are serious into racing cars, they're pretty good mechanics too. Like they're
On
not,
how things work. Yeah.
yeah, in the racing world for cars, your drivers know as much about the mechanics of the engine as your actual mechanics. So the mechanic might be better at it than the driver, but the driver knows a considerable amount about that car.
It's kind of like that brings up a really weird subject, but it's kind of like um they know when something's not quite right. It's like a really skilled rider or whatever. I see this on Facebook all the time. People post these videos and they'll say something like, I don't know what I see, but does anybody see something off? You know what I mean?
Sorry, I forgot to turn my phone on airplane mode.
But
Yeah, and that
something's
is
not quite right and I can feel it, but I don't know what it is.
so that actually I think is the perfect segue into talking about physics
Okay, great.
because the mechanics are what we have to comprehend,
Hmm.
but the physics are the experience of it.
Right.
And
And
what I
that
see a
big
lot,
word, physics, it used to scare me, but it's really very basic,
I
basic
know,
physics.
I had to totally geek out. Physics is fun. It's,
That is for us,
it's
right?
geeky. So what is physics? So I kind of explained what is biomechanics. It's biomechanics is just the study of the mechanical engineered design of a body. That's all it
Okay.
is, right? Just like engineering a building or designing a car, all engineering is based on design. Bodies have an inherent design. That's what biomechanics is the study of. Physics is essentially the study of how mass and energy work together,
Mm.
how they play together, how they're interchangeable. So physics is like if you take the body and we take away the big word of biomechanics, a body is, in terms of physics, a form. It's a shape.
Hmm.
It's mass,
It's
right?
just mass. That's what I
It's
was gonna say.
mass.
It's just a big mass
It's a big mass. It's a
or
big
little mass,
form.
whatever.
Yeah, it's a shape.
A small ball or a big horse. It's just mass.
Right. So how does that mass move and
Hmm.
how does that mass interact with other mass is the study
Hmm.
of physics.
Right.
It's really that simple. It's just mass and energy, right? And so when mass moves, it not only generates energy because we're a living creature, so we are force, and I don't mean force as in make somebody do something. I mean force as in the forces of motion,
Right.
right? So when we move, our specific biomechanics on the inside, that's the detail, moves our mass, which is just our overall body, through space, and that generates force. And
Hmm.
as we move through space, we bump into our horse bumps into us, we bump into other people, we have exchanges of words and thoughts and emotions. All of those are like little invisible currents and forces, right, from the outside that we manage, but we also generate force from the inside that plays into that, right? So that's what physics is. And I go, of course that already exists.
Right.
That's that's
That's
the
not new.
apple. No, it's the apple falling on Newton's head.
Hmm.
Why did the apple fall on my head? I wasn't doing anything. Nobody touched it. What was the invisible force that made the apple fall out of the tree on my head? Right?
Yeah.
That question was sort of, that's what we think of as the beginning of the science we call physics, the study of how mass and energy interchange, how they work together, right? And even Einstein, his theory of relativity, his big famous theory, E equals mc squared, right? What does that mean? It means energy, E, equals mass, a body, living or not, right? In motion at the speed of light, right? So energy equals mass times acceleration at the speed of light. And why was that so important and profound? Because if our bodies could move that fast, we're the same as the invisible force of energy.
Mm,
Energy is
that's geeky
mass.
cool.
Oh, I know. You totally geek out on that. Yes.
Sorry.
But I go, how many
That's so cool.
times we have heard about Einstein and that theory, but nobody pauses long enough to think of that. That is
In
a
real life,
massive,
it's a real life thing. It's
it's a
not
thing,
just an equation to read or know, or but all
right?
that really exists. It's a functioning thing.
Yeah. So the math is profound, but the math is just explaining what we call reality,
Yeah,
that interplay of form and energy,
it's
right?
just exchanges all day long.
Exchanges. So,
It's just movement, exchanges, patterns, thoughts,
and
all of that.
so how, like that just blows my mind to think at a certain speed, or we could think of that as frequency, right? Maybe even at a certain
Right? You could.
frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to geek out to Star Trek where they have the transporter, right?
Portal.
No, they have that transporter to get up and down from the ship, and they're
Yeah.
basically turning mass into energy and then recombining the
And
energy
moving
back
it
into
somewhere
mass.
else.
Yeah, and that's totally
Sounds kind of
possible.
familiar.
At least on Star Trek, it's familiar,
Yeah, it does.
right? But that's what energy equals mass times acceleration at the speed. That's what it means, right? And if you get into like classical physics is what we've covered with Newton's laws of motion
Hmm.
and all of that. And then quantum physics, I think people think quantum is this big mysterious word and they don't
Hmm.
know what it means. It means how much. Quanta, how much. That's all it means. How much energy, right? And so getting into just going deeper and deeper and deeper, or you could think bigger and bigger and bigger. How does nature work,
Hmm.
right? Where is the mass and where is the energy?
And
And
what was the new thing you shared with me about a theory that they finally have proved that there's no space?
oh, the Higgs field.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so the Higgs
I
field
love it.
and the Higgs boson. So the Higgs field, which was, I can't remember, it wasn't that long ago, but it's part of the new theory of how our reality works, right?
Mm.
So there's 12 particles that they say and four forces of nature, but the empty space is really not empty.
Right.
That
I
it's
love
like,
that. That
yeah,
makes so much sense to me. How couldn't there be empty space?
right.
Yeah.
And that's what they in I think it's in Bern, Switzerland, where they have the big particle accelerator,
Hmm.
CERN, and that's where they proved that theory. The original theory dates back to the early 1960s. It was just recently proven.
Proven. So
And
that
that's,
goes with it still existed before we had an understanding or a proof of it. It's
yeah,
kind of like everything else. Physics existed, biomechanics existed with way before these words were developed
for all of time.
for all of time. It's just we haven't put a label on it or acknowledged it as it's kind of like when you see a good mover, whether it's human or horse or whatever, you just naturally know that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it makes sense to us. We don't know why it makes sense,
Yeah,
but it's there.
yeah. Now I
The
am
physics and the
totally
biomechanics are spot on, whether we call it that or not.
exactly. So like
Yeah.
beautiful biomechanical coordination. If we were just talking about biomechanics, examples of that, and I'm going to totally like show my age as a Gen Xer because my one of my favorite athletes was watching Wayne Gretzky, who is a hockey player,
Uh-huh.
right? And his movement on the ice, how he could anticipate where the puck was going, it was like a dance. And
Right. That's a good way to put it.
usually ice hockey is pretty brutal, and it's a
Yep.
it's a bunch of like big guys slamming into each other. And you want to look at physics in motion, there you go, watch an ice hockey game. But Wayne Gretzky was just always in the right place at the right time. And the way he skated looked so effortless. It looked effortless. And then we could also say the same thing about, like Michael Jordan, his nickname, Air Jordan. He seemed
Right.
to just defy gravity, right? When he jumped, it was like, how does any human being get that much hang time?
And that language just blows me away. Defy gravity. And if we throw that into a physics point of view, I don't think people realize there's something called the ground reaction force. So we're actually, for every square inch we implode, we get a force that comes back at us from the ground. So this, I really would like to explore people's thoughts and get responses on what is their thinking around how gravity is for them, because it's really not a pull down thing.
I know. I was going to, everybody, especially as we age,
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it.
gravity is
Welcome to
only
my
pulling
world.
down, right?
So it's that whole thought or language around defy gravity or gravity's pulling me down. When if we look at it through physics, it really, it's a force that we can actually use to push off of.
Right. Or even I'll say, maybe we can't explain it yet in science. Maybe we can. I don't know. But I go, the Earth has gravity. There's a
Mhm.
gravitational field to the Earth, right? But the Earth's rotation is around the sun because of the sun's gravity. So which way does gravity go? Down into the Earth or up into the sun?
And you can look at it,
You can look at it both ways,
who knows?
right?
Oh, and that's the privilege we have as humans, is to actually be able to change how we relate to thought or the thoughts we have around these words like physics or biomechanics or whatever. That
Yeah.
it's
And
it's not that it's not that big.
it's just part of our daily life. It's
Hmm.
part of our reality. And so with horses and riders, when I first went down this track, I'm thinking, should have gone to vet school. Like, how I don't need to go to vet school to learn how to ride, right? I don't need to get my PhD in physics to understand the relationship between a horse and rider. I
Right.
just need to understand that there is something going on that is part of nature
Mm,
that I will never override. I need to learn to work with. Like that to me is the importance of understanding biomechanics and physics,
right.
is to go number one, as different as we think we are, right? And as different as we think our breed of horse is or how we ride is, you have a human body, all the same biomechanics. You
Hmm.
have an equine body, all the
Hmm.
same biomechanics, right? When we pull it down to that level, we can really see what we have in common. And you don't get to use the body in a sort of compromised way and have long-term health or great performance. That goes against
That's against
reality or
biomechanics and
nature.
physics. Yeah, it's totally and
Yeah.
we do it. We do it all day long.
We can function,
Yeah, we can
but we
function, we can
we
get
can't.
through it.
Right. And so people who are born with talent, to me, what talent is, whether it's the horse or the human, talent is this innate gift to just naturally have that more ideal coordination of the mechanical body and that more ideal ability to manage force, generate
Mm-hmm.
force in an efficient way,
Yeah,
right? That to me is talent. I was not born with talent. I had to work at it.
me
And
too.
so understanding mechanics and understanding how we feel it or experience it as energy and mass and motion, which is the physics, then we start to see how to maximize potential. So, like one of my again, I'm dating myself totally as a Gen Xer, but Bruce Lee, big favorite of mine, right? And to watch him move was incredible. And how he trained was through isometric exercises. He didn't lift
Mm-hmm.
weights, he didn't, do all these other things. And but martial arts is sort of similar to riding or Alexander technique in that you're mastering the use of yourself and
Oh, I
you're
gotta write that one down.
and you're playing.
Now I have a description.
Yeah, you like that one, huh?
I like that one. And
Okay,
it's
write that down.
recorded, so I've got it on tape.
But yeah, it's really even what we call self-carriage in horses, right? Which is a big, some kind of long-term term that we all use and comes from classical horse training, developing the self-carriage of our horse. What does that mean?
Well, that sounds like another
Again,
podcast.
it's the mastering, it's the horse mastering the coordination of their own body, right?
I liked
That
it that you put it that way. It's the horse mastering itself and not
right.
us manipulating it.
Otherwise, self would not be in the carriage
Yeah.
part, right?
But people, oh, that's just like that's a whole nother podcast because we as humans think we can manipulate that.
Absolutely. And this is where, if we understand the biomechanics, and if we think like one of the picture in my mind, total geek, is when the horse is moving, every change of force, in other words, every little bump or wave
Mm-hmm.
or shift or adjustment that I have to make in the saddle in order to not fall off or
Mm-hmm.
ride really well, either way, all of those forces that are being generated by the horse are generated by the coordination of the mechanics,
Right.
right? And what makes me a little crazy is with mechanics being just the current buzzword of the horse industry, a lot of biomechanical specialists are trying to manipulate the skeleton, move the bones around, place the legs in
Get
different
out of here.
places, put the neck in a certain place. And it's like they're trying to puppeteer the mechanics. And I
Good way to
go,
put it.
good luck with that. That
A
that's
bone.
that's pretty complicated puppeteering right there.
Yeah, let me know about how that works.
Yeah. And that to me,
I don't think I have enough physical empowerment to make that happen.
number one, yes, if you really
Mm-hmm.
understood mechanics, you would
Mm-hmm.
realize there's no way your little leg aid, even with a spur, is going to move that thing. No. Mm-mm. Right. And then if you also know a lot about biomechanics, you're going to realize that it's a whole system
That's
and
a good thing.
and it is
That's a good.
complex.
It's very complex. It's
Mhm.
simple but not easy, like the podcast we did a few weeks ago.
Yeah, simple but not easy
Mm-hmm.
is it's and again, here's a physics classical Newtonian law. For every action, there's always an opposite and equal reaction. So when we use
Yep.
an aid, right, how we use our aid, the direction of force, the amount of force will have an impact on how the horse manages the force. So we're two forms or two masses. You have the mass of the horse and the mass of the rider. And in motion, you have this crazy symphony of forces going all different directions.
You
And
know what
like,
I was playing with yesterday. So this is how geeky I get when I ride. So I'm thinking in my head, I want the horse to go to the right. And I am working on stopping this habit of shortening my left side to make the horse go to the right. It's inevitable that even though I don't want to,
That's your habit.
that's my habit. I shorten my left pec. And I'm like, why am I doing that?
Yeah,
But it's the thought. It's the thought comes and I can't seem to pause and interrupt it fast enough.
that's because it's been there since you learned to walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is not simple, but not easy. Even I've been riding for 60 years now. So talk about dating myself. But
So, and that's
this is
just
like a
it.
lifelong conversation of physics and how we use ourselves and biomechanics.
Yeah. So the mechanical body doesn't change, but
Right.
the way we use
Exactly.
it, consciously or unconsciously, is actually in our control. And that's where we change the physics, which then changes the mass. We change
Yeah.
the energy output by a different coordination of the mass, or it's interchangeable. The energy and the mass are interchangeable. So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if we think differently, which is a thought force, or if we move differently, which then
Hmm.
affects whether we feel calm or agitated. So, in other words, like there's lots of research on you can't really authentically smile. You can fake a smile, but you can't authentically smile when you feel angry or mad. And
That's a
you
good point.
and it's very, very, very difficult to walk slow when you're anxious or angry. Like those are kind of the physiological connections between how, like if we even just think of forces of thought and emotion, how that
Hmm.
influences the physical form, right?
Yeah. I
When
mean,
we're
down to the
thinking,
cellular level, it's that big. It's down to the cellular level.
right.
Yeah.
So being in a hot, heavy hurry to get to my appointment, I'm getting in my car, all of my energy, all of the forces have changed. My mental
Right.
focus has changed, right? Does it get me there any faster? That's what we think it's going to do,
We do.
right? And then if we actually did the research shows you don't get there any faster than if you just relax and remain efficient and aware.
Hmm.
But the likelihood of getting in an accident on the way to your appointment goes down dramatically,
Yes.
right? If you don't rush and agitate the energy.
Yeah.
Same with our horses.
Good point.
Yeah.
It's
So, and the language of horses is it's a nonverbal language, and how horses interact, like we talked about last time, the herd dynamics
mhm.
are really about spatial awareness and movement.
And that goes back to that new theory that was proven that there is no space. And I think about that like my herd mare. You think, why does she have to have so much space?
Because she
But
does.
because she does. And the other horses get it. It's like they're so sensitive.
To that invisible bubble of space.
Yeah, and it's
Mhm.
really in their world, it's not invisible. It's very real to them.
We have that too. Like I'll say, because, you know, a lot of my clients are women, and I go, that feeling at a party or you're out at a bar and some guy stands just too close.
That's that
That
herd mare thing.
that feeling. Yep. Because
Or
it's a little bit invasive. And I go, every woman nods her head and goes, "Oh, yeah, I know that feeling." Right? But that's somebody, he could be a very polite person, it could be have the best of intentions. I'm not saying that guy is doing anything wrong, but it's like somebody just coming into your personal space a little too close makes us feel like that's the physics of it. That's the unspoken part of it,
The
right?
unspoken part. I like that. And it's not, it's invisible
But
to
we
the
feel it
naked eye, but it's very real.
and we feel it,
And we feel it. Yeah.
right? And I go, if you don't think we don't feel invisible forces, I go, come and feel some humidity, right? You can't see humidity and you can't see temperature, but we feel it, right? Those are very important forces. And when we ride horses, every change in the coordination of our body as a rider changes the force impact that our
Right.
horse feels from us.
It's
And
almost
every
overwhelming.
change, it's pretty mind-blowing. I
It's
mean, I love
overwhelming.
this because at the end of the day, it actually comes down to something very simple. What balance is equalizing and directing all these forces.
Right.
So we only have to put them one place, right? We don't have to manage 8,000 body parts. What we have to manage is one, two, or three dimensions or directions of all the forces gathering together and equalizing. That's balance,
Hmm.
right? So that's why you and I both work on the axial skeleton primarily.
Hmm.
The mechanics of the axial skeleton are going to dictate the use of the entire body.
I agree with that.
And so every little change in the axial skeleton changes the force. So if it's the human axial skeleton, we impact our horse's movement by how we coordinate our body because it generates different directions of force,
Hmm.
different amounts of force that all are like the apple falling on the head, right? It's an invisible force, but we feel it, and our horse feels it from us, and vice versa, right? So a talented horse that is naturally well coordinated is the most expensive horse out there because they feel easy to ride.
Right. And they have a, you can just see the picture of that, what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But every horse, just like every human, could learn better coordination
Hmm.
of the physical body and learn better force management,
Yes, I agree.
right? So when you think about it like forces, you're not going to take a river and put a halter on a river and a big leverage bit and some spurs and tell that river what to
Go
do.
this way.
Right. Right. I go, that's how I think about horses is just this river of energy.
I
So
like that.
how do I shape? How do I channel the forces of motion? Right? Rather than trying to puppeteer body parts, I go, if I can shape the current, right?
Mm.
Increase the flow, decrease the flow, take it on a right bend, take it on a left bend, help it become smoother, help it stay in between these two banks, right? I can make the banks narrower or wider. But riding the horse is just a channeling of energy.
I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know what? It takes all the pressure off the rider.
Like we've got to do something big.
Exactly, because if we think of,
We've got to be this special human.
I know, we have to have our degrees and we have to get our leg in the right place and we have to do 8,000 things every stride. And oh my God, don't let your horse fall apart.
Yeah, that whole thing.
And I go, no, no, every horse is just sort of a flowing river, right? And even though even the same river is never the same.
It's yeah, and humans the same thing.
It's
It's kind of like I always refer to it as guiding a 2-year-old. How do you can't grab it
you
and
can,
manipulate it, but you can,
you
but
can.
you usually get screaming.
It's usually much worse.
Yeah.
No,
But
so
if
what
you
you
just kind
figured
of
out,
guide it and go, "Oh, what about this way?" or "How, let's try this," or
yeah.
it's much easier. It's a much better conversation.
Yeah, and what you're describing with a 2-year-old is exactly what I see with horses. I
Right.
go, people do think They can pick up a horse or leverage a horse like it's a toddler. I go, just
Mm-hmm.
because it's acting like a toddler, that is still a serious force of nature you got at the end of that lead rope,
Yep.
right? And so that kind of idea that we're going to pick up that toddler and control it, right? As a mother, you go, well, that didn't work. Let me try something else, right? But a lot of people with horses are still trying the same concept. Let me grab that horse and control it. And I go, good luck with that. You
I
just
think
keep on keeping on
that's
because
really important, those words, controlling as opposed to what would be another way to say it. It's
directing.
directing, like we use a lot in Alexander, is
Mhm.
guiding.
Guiding,
Yeah,
directing,
directing,
channeling.
channeling the forces. Yeah.
Yeah. And that when I start to think of my horse, like when I'm riding, it's this liquid flow of energy, right? And that's what a river is. We see the invisible forces. We see the force of the current. We see the force we see the direction. We see the magnitude of the water and all of how many rocks it has, what the slope is, all of that affects the flow or the energy of the water,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I go, so we can play with it, or we could just ride it for fun. We don't try to change the river when we go kayaking or inner tubing.
No, we're
That's
trying to stay balanced over the flow. That's
and
all
that's
we're
the
trying
fun
to do
part.
so we don't tip over.
Yeah, so that's the fun part, right? And when I remind people of that on their horse, big smiles. It's
Right.
it's fun again, like canoeing down a river. It's like, oh, I could just ride what is.
Mm-hmm.
I could just find the middle of this current and stay balanced on my kayak or inner tube or whatever and have a good time.
Right.
I go, yeah, we could do that on a
We
horse
could.
too.
We
And a lot
could.
of times that's where I'll start with people. And we may need to talk about, we might have before, I'll have to go back and look about passenger riding. But passenger riding is kind of that idea that the rider's job is to learn how to manage their own self-carriage. How do we coordinate our biomechanics in order to stabilize, equalize our forces
Mm-hmm.
while we're over this moving force, this river of energy, right? And I go, before the horse bucks, you feel the force of the buck.
Before what happens happens.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah, and
force generation is what moves the body.
I love it when people get to that place that they're, because it's a biomechanical thing that if you're tensing a muscle, all the proprioceptors are working, so you can't hear anything through your body.
Yeah, you
So
can't
if
feel.
you, yeah, you can't feel, you can't listen and get information. So when riders can get to the point that they can have their own self-carriage of their head, neck, back, and pelvis, then they can actually hear what's happening underneath
Yeah,
them. And I think
because
that is
we're
that's where the, that's the juiciness of it all, is when you get there. It's not, you know, indirect rain and right leg and sorry gang, it's not that. Um,
inside leg to outside rein.
is that
That'll
what that
be
is?
that'll be
Yeah,
50
something like
bucks.
that.
Yep.
Something like that.
Heels down, shoulders back. Look where you're
Oh
going.
my gosh, that
That'll be
brings
50
back
bucks.
memories.
Oh, that'll be
This,
$85. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, we've all been there. I've been there. I'm not
Yeah.
saying I was extremely competitive.
No, but I wish, like when I work with little kids are still like up to the age of 12, the human body, bones are changing length.
Mhm,
So we are in a physical, unstable state, right? So up to about the age of 12 or 13, just to get through life and get to school and every day, the forces and physics of how we balance are changing because internally our bones are growing. We are a
Right.
different length of body. We are a different mass during those ages from the time we're born to about 12, 13, right? And so that's why when you put a kid on a horse, they instantly can navigate that river of force because they're doing it off the horse all day, every day. Once we
Yeah.
get into our teenage years, we start to solidify our habits, right? So
Hmm.
it's really kind of going back to just exploring, what does this feel like? What does that feel like? And good mechanical use always makes us feel safer, always makes us feel more stable, always brings sort of more ease, or like you're saying,
Hmm.
when you release all that extra holding and muscle tightness, you also get more information.
Right. And sometimes that can be scary. I've had people go, whoa, 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 we need to stop right there. That's enough. And I imagine the horses are the same way.
Like an
They
overload
an
from
overload
changing.
of, oh my gosh, I really didn't know all that was there. Wait a minute.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's huge for some people
it is huge.
to
And I want to
figure
wrap it
out.
up because we're going on for a while, but I'd love, like, obviously, the interplay. If we think of physics as an exchange between energy and mass,
Hmm.
or mass and energy, biomechanics is just the detail of that mass.
Right.
That's all it is. It's the detail. But what we're really playing with is mass and energy
The
because
forces. Yeah.
the forces of motion,
Hmm.
right? And how the mass adapts to different energy,
Hmm.
right? So the mass generates energy and has to adapt to energy. And I go, I still can't do the math. And I read about physics instead of like novels. Like
That's me.
I,
I do the same
none of the
thing.
books on my shelves are like
I don't have any novels.
fiction. I know I don't have a lot of fiction on my bookshelf because I mean, life itself to me, like physics and biomechanics, there's a lot of books out there and on YouTube, there's a ton of
That's
videos
true.
where these amazingly brilliant physicists and scientists are doing TED Talks and even their own videos to help us understand what this research means. Because when we start to change our perspective, we're not changing what is and what
Right.
will always be. We're changing how we interact with it.
Exactly.
But that changes everything. Our experience, it
It changes the
totally
experience. Yeah,
changes the
that's what I was talking
experience of
about.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I encourage all you horse geeks out there to learn about without pressure. Like there's nothing you have to do with it, but it does help you look at your horse and your own riding a bit differently
Hmm.
to do a little research on what we call biomechanics or just be curious about physics.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be quantum physics, it doesn't have to be classical physics, but understanding some of the more modern research on physics is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, it
That
is.
that reality is not only what we perceive through our five senses. There's more to it.
And the horse's reality is not necessarily ours.
Their perception is
It's totally
completely
different than
different
ours.
than our
Hmm.
perception.
Yeah.
And how that affects decision making moment to moment is
It's
huge.
huge. Huge, huge.
Hmm. All right, you guys, we better wrap it up. And
Hmm.
thanks for joining us. And we will see you on the next episode of Horse Geeks. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I love talking about this shit.
Yeah, I want to hear people's comments when they just wrap their head around it a little bit.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right.
See you
Take
next
care.
time.
Bye.
Bye.